Hello, hello, and welcome to another book review. It's been a while, but it takes a while to go through books. um, well, I started earlier this year around Christmas reading The Hobbit, and I got done with that, but since about, March, April, on and off, because I've been reading other things going on at the same time, I finally completed the first book of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Fellowship of the Ring. So, that's good news, as Pippin would say. So first time actually reading this book, seen the movies countless times. It's part of like a set thing where it has The Hobbit and the three other books. Like I have the Two Towers here. I'm about to start reading probably tomorrow. I wanted to make sure I read it before July, so I finished it today, and I was like, all right, good, done with it. Now I get to talk about it. um, if everyone's only thinking about the movies and everything like that, how accurate isn't two of the books? And you could, well, I guess I don't have to say spoilers because the book's 70 years old, so there's not really much you can say about that. Um, if you're wondering who I am, my name is Brandon Wheeler. I'm a kind of newy self-published author of my own books, fantasy series, two of them so far in the series, and I'm working on a third one. Just had to put off other things to do stuff with that, so it's getting back into it. But trying to read things more for inspiration and stuff like that. Like I'm currently going through C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters. I've been reading a lot of Lewis stuff. I've only read the first of his Narnia book, but I've been reading other things by him. And it's like, you know what? Everyone keeps pointing at Tolkien. Let's read Tolkien. My brother read these books years ago before the movies because he wanted to read them before the movies. And I was like, okay. I didn't have any interest then, but considering how much the movies have become more important to me over the years and all the crap that's going on with the series, that people, how bad they treated everything and blah, 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 all that stuff and things like that, I was like, you know what, let me just stick to the source material. So, reading this and everything. Now, for reference, I have seen Ralph Bashki's version of that carried Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers, and it doesn't have Return of the King. I've not seen the Return of the King cartoon. Seen the Hobbit one. It's like the people who made the Hobbit one made the Return of the King one, because from what I remember, it looks like the same artwork. Seen some clips of it, but so I can compare it to the Ralph Bashki version. The reason why I bring that up is because, oddly enough, the Ralph Bashki version is more accurate in some ways to the book than Peter Jackson's versions. Just thing like. In the original movie and in the book, Aragorn's more excited about trying to be like, King of Gondor and reuniting that line and everything like that. Whereas the movie, he's more reluctant. Gimli is much more of a serious, poetic soul in the book. Like, they have him in Moria and he sings, or he recites the, it's probably my favorite one of the, there's a lot of songs. If you go through Tolkien's book, there's so many song stuff and everything, and for some reason that part kind of excites me because, I mean, it was in the Hobbit and stuff too, but for some reason I want to put stuff like that in my own stories and how music is, because people sing and all that, and maybe it's just something in the fantasy world version. It's something I've always just wanted to do for a long time, and Tolkien definitely does that a lot. But, yeah, probably my favorite version our favorite song, and at least in this book, is by Gimli called, I'll just call it The World Was Durin's Day. That's what I'm just calling it, because this whole, poem thing that goes through, I'm just thinking, wow. But The World Was Fair in Durin's Day. Read up Durin's Day poem. That's probably my favorite one in the book and everything, but really made me appreciate Gimli more. In the movies, I know they made him kind of a character, he's more of the jocular character or whatever like that. But that's not really a bad change and everything, but he's much more serious and poetic and everything in the book and everything. To be fair, Legolas doesn't really have a lot of lines in the book. Of course, he doesn't in the first movie either. In the book, he's more of a jerk. He comes off much more of a jerk in the book than he does, at least in the first movie, I'd say. But it does say after Lothlorien that Legolas and Gimli were already fast friends. Compared to, they weren't really kind of friends, really, till, Gimli acknowledging it in the third movie or whatever. But they were kind of already fast friends in the first book. And a lot of differences with Haldir and everything. I have seen the first Hobbit movie. I haven't seen the rest yet, but I know a lot of studio meddling. There's a lot of studio meddling, and I know some of the story behind that and everything, how stressful it was to Peter Jackson and everything. But to be fair, a lot of different things were actually in those Hobbit things, just not directly in the Hobbit book. But some of it was mentioned because they were at the Alvarad Council, and Gandalf was recalling everything that happened up to the point, and he told what he was doing when he went off away from the Durin's company and everything. He dealt with the stuff with the necromancer and stuff with Sauron and all that. That actually was happening. It mentions it here in this book. So it's just kind of like, huh, okay. So he mentions all the different stuff with Sauron and everything. Of course, that's Tolkien, using what he had to kind of give ways and everything. So, but still, surprisingly, Jackson's version, because that's what everyone's probably going to acknowledge and everything, is still very accurate in everything, how the book goes and everything. A lot of lines are kind of mixed up. They may happen at different areas or given to different characters. Like, I just finished this Boromir's thing, at the council of, like, it is a gift, a weapon to be used for the foes of Mordor and everything. That's actually him talking at the end to Frodo at Mon Hen, and how everything goes into that. Like, the book ends with Frodo and Sam just going off. It doesn't even mention, it doesn't show anything about, Boromir and what happens to him and everything like that. They go off trying to search for Frodo because they realize he's about to run off. Sam realizes where Frodo would go. Him and Frodo go to the cross to the other side. That's how the book ends. So everything that happens with, Boromir's sacrifice and everything, that's probably the start of Two Towers. So I was like, huh, interesting. But a lot of songs with different stuff. Some things Frodo would, Frodo did some singing. The others did singing and everything. The one thing sticks out in Return of the King movie, Arwen does the poem thing, talking to her father about the sword. The crownless again shall be king. That was actually Bilbo. Bilbo actually did that song and everything, speaking about all these different. There's just tons of things with Bilbo putting together songs and stuff while he's at Rivendell. The crownless king would be king. That was all Bilbo. Bilbo was the one saying stuff like that. And also, was the phrase "all that glitter is not gold"? Was that from Tolkien? Was that invented by Tolkien? Because Bilbo says that in the book. And I was thinking, I hear that thing all over the place. I remember it from that SpongeBob episode. But it's always it's a famous phrase, but it's like, did Tolkien invent that? Or has that been around longer than Tolkien? But it's like, I wonder if Tolkien invented that. Is that something he made and we just didn't realize that this whole time? So I was like, oh, interesting. Of course, Tom Bombadil is the whole beginning of the book is like 3 chapters of Tom Bombadil. It's just like him and his wife, girlfriend, I'm going to say wife, Goldberry, spirits, not spirits, things like that. Are they real, not real, some sort of mayor? I know a little bit of the kind of history of like who the mayor is and stuff like that, because the Silmarillion things. People, when you look at videos, people mention like, well, but this a Gandalf and that a Gandalf and different things about mayor and all that. It, so you learn about reading comments on videos and everything if you want to pay attention to it. But, let's see. What other differences were there? Of course, age-wise, Frodo was actually in his 50s because 30 years. But because he had close proximity to the ring, he didn't look like he was aging either, interestingly enough. So it was just kind of like, eh. One change I will say that I think does actually make sense for the movies, which I actually do like better. It mentions when they set out from Rivendell that Aragorn only brought the reforged sword. He already had the sword reforged when they were leaving Rivendell and everything. He only brought the sword. Like Gimli only brought his axe and Legolas only brought a bow. And I was thinking, in the movies, Legolas has kind of like these 2 sword things that he keeps on him. Gimli has a couple more extra smaller axes and everything besides his big one. And Aragorn actually has a bow that he has, him being a ranger. That was actually something supposedly improvised by Viggo Mortensen as a suggestion, because he's like, well, if he's a ranger, he's out in the wild, he has to hunt and do something himself. And everyone's like, oh yeah, he probably would. In the book specifically, it mentions he doesn't have a bow. But it was like, you know what? I think I'd rather have him have a bow. Specifically because it's just kind of like, it'd make more sense. I mean, yeah, he could probably forge a lot, that'd be probably maybe where Tolkien was, being forward and being more of a forager in some ways. But I I like the version where more he has a bow and stuff. So it's like that might be one thing for the movies to say, you know what, that actually may be an improvement in a slight way, and more conscientious of stuff. Boromir again, um, very noble and everything in the book, but the Fellowship wasn't even going to all the way. All of them could even go to Moria. I mean Mordor. Some of them were only going to go a certain way. Like Legolas and Gimli were said they would only go a certain way, and Boromir he wasn't even supposed to be at Rivendell. He was going to Rivendell for like advice or something like that to try to figure out, seek help or stuff going on with Gondor, trying to fight stuff with Osgiliath, stuff going on with Gondor and Mordor. So he just happened to be there, and he arrived there at the council, and he's like, oh, okay. So at a certain point, he was going to head back to Gondor. He wasn't going to go all the way. And of course, it ends with him trying to take the ring and stuff. But again, mentions how he regrets that he's sorry and everything like that. So it just makes sense of, madness took him. Yeah, madness did take him for sure. But you see what happens with that once Gandalf leaves. Trying to remember. Oh, some things were different, like Moria. Balin seemingly went back to Moria to try to do things of reestablish a dwarf colony, not necessarily already have one there, like what the movie version with Gimli was already aware of. But it's not really that bad of a change of how it is. So, but even some small changes, like in the movie, they have the thing with Aragorn and Frodo on the rock, and the thing has to move forward, move back, and everything. It's not like that in the book, but at different points when they were walking through through Moria, like certain things would just spring open all of a sudden, and they would have to like try to avoid that and everything. Like one crack was about 7 feet wide, and Pippin absolutely refused to go over it for the longest while until they finally were able to coax him over. So you got a lot of differences of stuff going on, and different moments happen, different stuff, but it's still similar enough that you would probably like it. I do see now why there's certain people who would hold fast more to Ralph Bashki's version as a more accurate form in some ways, because book-wise, it's like, it is actually more accurate. But yeah, Jackson's is just a better overall version so far. Until I get into Two Towers, I'll read that, and then I remember how Bashki did that, and I was like, okay. Like, I still don't know why he made Boromir look like a Viking and Aragorn look like an Eskimo. Like, what's with that? What's with Legolas? And like, he still didn't. The person who saved Frodo on the horse and everything was Glorfindel. Glorfindel. Now, it wasn't Arwen in the movie. I know they made Arwen bigger in a role. Completely ignored Glorfindel, though. They did tone it down with trying to add Arwen to Helm's Deep, and of course they didn't go with that. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but unfortunately it's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. So taking Arwen away from that was like, okay, good. Although Eowyn fighting Uruk-hai in the caves, some scenes of that, and her yelling curse or whatever she does, it's just like, that's an interesting behind the scenes. So yeah, I've studied a lot. I watched a lot of the appendices and stuff. My brother owns the extended versions. Yes, I watched them. Yes, I watched all the behind the scenes stuff and things as well. So I've done a lot of research and everything. But one specific difference: movie version versus book version of Saruman. What movie version made it specifically mentioned that he was the one who caused Caradus to fall, do the snow things and stuff like that. In the book, it makes it, Gimli made it sound like Caradus, the mountain itself, was very cruel and did stuff like that. It wasn't necessarily Saruman. Some said like there's kind of some voices on the wind, but it wasn't necessarily breaching like it was in fact Saruman. Of course, that could be stuff later on, maybe in Two Towers reveals, oh yeah, that was actually Saruman. I don't know yet. We will find out. So Saruman is not exactly has a flow in the first book as what movie version was. But an interesting thing I'd never picked up on, I didn't know why. In Ralph Bashki's version, they do have Saruman dressed in like red and different colors. I was like, well, if he's Saruman the White, why would he be in different colors? And in the movie, he was just dressed in white. It wasn't in different colors. In the book, when Gandalf arrives, Gandalf is actually found by Radagast the Brown. it mentions Radagast. Radagast was searching for him to tell him, like, hey, Saruman is looking for you. And Radagast didn't know what the issue was. He didn't know Saruman's betrayal or anything like that. Radagast is still unknowing of what's going on. But when Gandalf gets there, he notices that Saruman is specifically like in a different coat, like in different colors and everything like that. And he asks about that specifically. If you know what this is, I had like heat stroke, something happened when I was in the army, so it's like a speech help. Can't talk right, that thing. So it's why it's a little bit all over. Anyway, but with Saruman, he had a coat in many colors, and he was saying, like, you know, when it's white, things could be wiped away, washed anew, made things different, and all that. It was kind of like for me, a subtle, well, maybe not so subtle, but a really different way to show Saruman's thing from changing from like a purity of, yeah, things are black and white to something of, you know, madness with color, different colors and everything like that. He seemed much more arrogant and deranged automatically before Gandalf arrives. Like in the movie, Gandalf arrives and he's already automatically talking to Saruman about everything. I think Ralph Bashki versions again follows more of this, but it is more of a stark contrast to the book. Like movies, I think version he kind of wanted the power for himself, but he's kind of making it look like he was outlining with Sauron because he didn't necessarily see any way forward. But in book version, yeah, he's obviously coveting in himself. But Saruman's much more automatically deranged when you kind of arrive to the surprise of Gandalf in some ways. So it's like interesting. But I don't know. We'll see more. There's so many differences and stuff with how the book is, movies version. You're just like, wow, they condensed a lot. Even the extended versions, they condensed a lot of what they're supposed to do with a 3-hour movie into this. I mean, Ralph Bashki's was 2 movies in one. Peter Jackson wanted to do the same thing. He actually only wanted to do 2 movies as well. And someone said, are there 3 books? He's like, yeah, make 3 movies. Which, honestly, for this was the right decision. Now, I know Hobbit had a lot of studio meddling and a lot of crap with it. I don't know what they would have done with that. I know it was very stressful to them, and I can't blame all of them with that because a lot of problems go on with that. So, although, oddly enough, from what I remember, because I know what happens to everyone, because I've seen clips, how some things are in those movies is actually more accurate than the cartoon version that I remember seeing a long time ago. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. But definitely different in how everything... Oh, Galadriel. Celeborn, her husband, has more lines than he does in the movie. A lot more lines. Galadriel sings. Again, there's a lot of singing of stuff that goes on. Galadriel sings, Aragorn sings, Gimli sings, Legolas sings, Frodo sings, Bilbo sings a lot. All the hobbits have something. Sam has something. There's like so many songs with everybody. Oh, and if you played that Fellowship of the Ring game, the one that wasn't made to be like the movies, it was actually, oddly enough, kind of closer in some ways to the book, where it had Tom Bombadil and stuff like that. It was not exactly the best. It was kind of accurate in some ways, but not exactly the best. But yeah. Yes, we played that. Yes, it was. It's the reason why they made a movie version for the Two Towers that covered both Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers. It was like, better decision. That game was hard, too. Once you get the Helm's Deep, that got hard real quick. Especially if you try playing as Gimli. That definitely gets hard. It's just like, gosh. It took forever to... Well, in the Return of the King one, it took forever to pass the extra level thing where you're playing through 20 levels. It took me and my brother so long to finally get through that. It was a long time. But anyway, that's beside the point. But yeah, she gives Gimli 3 strands. Gimli falls smitten with Galadriel. Like, he's absolutely smitten. Like, even towards the end, it's like, I've been through so much, but now leaving Lothlorien, I feel so broken. He did not want to leave Lothlorien. He didn't want to go in because they wanted to blind him and everything. He's like, I'm going to go free. I will not stay here. And then at the end, he's like, I don't want to leave your beauty, Miss Galadriel. I want to stay. Like, staring at you. He fell in love with Galadriel, basically. And he asked for like a strand from her, like a hair from her head, and she gave him 3. And he's like, I'm going to set this in crystal. and it would be an heirloom passed down through my family for generations. He was completely smitten with her, and it was just like, okay. So much more of a, as like someone mentioned in the comment, poetic soul compared to movie versions and stuff like that. But again, you have a lot of changes of how everything goes, but I can't really give a general book version versus movie version until I read all three, which I'm hoping to try to read through all three by the end of the year. It just depends how everything goes and all that. But as far as how this book is, honestly, my favorite portion is the poem with Durin's Day and Moria, of what, Gimli sings this portion and everything. And honestly, reading the book, I kept thinking a lot of illustration-wise, like, because I've been trying to learn to draw and I haven't worked on it in a while, but doing a lot of drawing stuff is just like, imagine the whole book illustrated. Like, I see illustrations that people put on all the time, and it's just like, but, man, you could definitely do a lot. I'm just thinking a lot of the potentials and stuff like that, but if you've not read this book, it is a little slow to get into, because when it's talking about concerning hobbits in the beginning, because it's giving a background to who hobbits and everything were for like 20 pages, literally. It gets a little tedious on like that end, but it is, once you start flowing into it and everything, it's like, okay, interesting. So I don't want to say life-changing, but definitely huge inspiration for some way, especially the Durin Day. I don't know, for some reason the Durin Day poem, that I don't know, that's my favorite portion. Have you read this book? If you have, what is your favorite poem out of it? Is it Galadriel's song, one of Bilbo's many things, something from Aragorn, all the others? Oh, I don't want to get into it. But book one down. And book two will take another 3 months. All right, well, I'll see you in the next one whenever I read another book or get done with that one. See you in the next one. Goodbye.